All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're in for a real treat tonight on Sportswire Radio because I actually get to speak with somebody, which is going to be a rare thing that is actually richer than me, which is kind of hard to find these days because I'm actually considered to be almost, I wouldn't quite say the $1 million man, Tom Bryce, but we're very close to that. But this person here tonight has had a long and decorated career over a short amount of time. He comes from the land of NFTs. He is our reigning defending DBW Hub City champion. He is from the metaverse. He has pretty much done it all when it comes to DBW. He's also become an up and coming star in VTW versus the World Wrestling. You've seen him in a number of different states, different companies. He's even wrestled in my neck of the woods here in New York, and he's going to talk about his journey and more, and especially, of course, DBW's upcoming show, Double Cross, because our guest here tonight is actually no longer contractually obligated to compete in DBW, but yet he is the DBW Hub City champion. He's going to talk all about that plus much, much more. He needs no further introduction, but because he's a champion and it's his first time here and he's an emerging pro wrestler, he has to get the introduction that everybody else gets here on Sportswire Radio. So with that, without further ado here on the Sports Report, number one global sports show, the reigning, defending DPW Hub City champion of the world from the land of NFTs, the Double B Wakefield. The champ is here.
Oh my goodness. Wow, what an introduction. That is one of the best introductions I've ever had for an interview. Thank you for having me here, Mr. Tom Bryce.
I appreciate that. Certainly, DVG was not giving you those in DBW. That's for sure. He was definitely
No,
not.
no.
In fact, he was saying a word that we can't say on Sportswire here because we're a family station. So, certainly, you're lucky tonight, champ, that you're in a family environment here because certainly we try to do the right things by the kids here. But I am very honored to have you. Obviously, DBW has quickly become one of my favorite shows in, I would say, all of wrestling. You guys have done a phenomenal job. I'm going to talk all about that, plus your journey, VTW. But set the tables for us here in Double Cross coming up, you and Robert Pearson, because I find this so fascinating, champ, because you're no longer contractually obligated to be in DBW. Your contract is run out, but you're still the champion. And I guess if you win this match here, I'm assuming you're going to take your talents to North Carolina and VTW and permanently have that DBW Hub City title.
Well, honestly, like I didn't want to do it. Like I spoke to DBW management. They gave me the contract. It was for 5 years, but
That's a
it
long
wasn't
time,
enough.
5 years.
Yeah,
In this
it
day and age, a
was.
long
It
time.
really was. And then the money wasn't right, honestly. It was, I don't want to disclose the amount, but
Well, you're a
it
rich
was
man. Trust me. From one rich man to another, I can understand.
agreed. But sometimes I just want to make a quick paycheck. So, like, why not try to get as much money as possible? Go for your worth, DBW Hub State champion. And then I got a call from the VTW management offering a better contract, significant less time in a year, but it's still more money than I could imagine DBW ever paying. So I signed the contract. I gave them the paperworks. The lawyers approved, and now I'm a part of VTW.
Well, I have to ask because you spoke a number of different things, and I'm going to get to Omen Black in a second. I want to give a big shout out to Omen. Obviously, this is Sportswire. It's his kind. It's become his show. But you've had a long storied career in DBW. You've been the two-time number one contender champion. You've been a tag team champion. Currently have held the Hub City title. You're the first ever one to have held this title. You've been champ for a little over 3 months, and you held the world title for quite a while. And you're a part of some matches that are some of the most viewed in the company's history. So Why the lack of respect in the contract?
Beats me. I've heard a lot of budget cuts as of late for DBW. I know a lot of people have heard budget cuts before, like in the E, but no, it was mostly just they didn't have enough money to pay for me at all. I don't know if ticket sales were down or what. It's very confusing in my eyes.
But I would think though that you were one of the guys that almost has fostered DBW to this company that's really transformed. I mean, you guys have become like over time a real wrestling company. You guys went from one scene to another scene where you guys are like a legitimate company now in a lot of ways.
A legitimate company that can't afford to pay their wrestlers. That's the only thing. And I've been in with DBW since the way beginning, almost 10 years
I
now.
was gonna say, I mean, it's been I think what 7 or 8 years at least, right? With
Yeah, it's
DBW.
it's really been it's really been crazy is how long I've been with the company. And I've had a lot of fake retirements. I've had a lot of
I've seen
come
a
and
name
goes.
change. I've seen obviously your
Yeah.
ring attire change. I mean, you were basically doing kind of I guess the Sting Crow trench coat thing for a while. Now
Yeah, yeah.
some people are saying you stole Michael Jackson's jacket, but I don't quite see the Michael Jackson resemblance there, unless I'm missing
I
something.
I'm more or less like Kanye West in a sense.
Well, if you certainly had married Kim, I would certainly have given you that much. But I'll come back to some of that here. I want to say hello to Omen first in a second. Of course, our friends over in the IMF, and you can follow the IMF on YouTube at IMF Wrestling 666. I'm always glad to see my show get celebrities. How are we doing tonight? Having the girl from the ring of such a scary movie and a great movie, by the way. Welcome to my show. And he also said tomorrow night, meaning I guess because he's going to come on tomorrow night. I think when
Oh, okay, okay.
Jason Storm comes on, but he says welcome to my show here. All right, fair enough here. So Robert Pearson, I mean, you've been doing these challenges, these open challenges of late on Thursday Night Thunder Punch, and again, you can go to obviously DBW. It's a dominating breakout wrestling on YouTube. Dominant breakout wrestling. It'll come up here, but I mean. So, Robert Pearson, what can we expect here when we see this match? Because obviously, we've had a couple of different times when it was supposed to air, but obviously SummerSlam, life gets in the way, and I would imagine we'll eventually see it, and we'll still see you as a DBW employee, I guess, for as long as until this gets released. But what can we
Yeah,
expect here with Robert Pearson, my friend?
first thing, that's a weird way to extend a contract, just not uploading the actual show. But second, what we expect from Robert Pearson, a whole lot of nothing, because Robert Pearson, we got this what looks like a homeless man from Maryland show up and claim he's the real bone shaker, whatever that means. And he expects to come just because he won a fatal four way with a bunch of nobodies. He expects to come up in here and challenge me for the Hub State Championship. At least Van Hansen is a decorated independent star,
He had,
unlike
and that was a great match, by the way. That was
thank
kind of
you.
a surprise because you were dealing with DVG for a while, a guy that was again we referred to as saying a name about you, but at least Van
Another
Hansen. That was a
nobody.
good match, by the way.
Thank you. At least I had respect for Van Hansen because he actually hit me a little too hard, and I kind of respected him for that. Like,
Oh, really?
and he's a great YouTuber too. So I respect Van Hansen very deeply, but he just was not enough for double B guaranteed.
Well, that's definitely the case here. But I mean, you threw out these open challenges here throughout these last several Thursday Night Thunder Punch shows,
Mhm.
obviously leading. And we've seen, obviously, you won the title at Total Domination 8, obviously, Exodus as well, you were a part of. But I mean, what was the mindset in throwing out these open challenges?
Honestly, my main goal before contractual agreements really started to unfold, my main goal was to make this title more relevant than the World Championship because you see people like Mr. Judgment, you see people like Scorpion the Assassin, Damien Fatale, who I beat in the past.
I'm going to get
Uh,
to that certainly as well. I'm going to definitely get to that.
we see all these old part timers show up and win this championship. It's almost like the Universal Championship. It's like all these part timers not showing up
Brock
every single day.
Lesnar, John
Brock
Cena when he
Lesnar.
was there.
You have
Sure,
a
I get
bunch
it.
of old men winning this championship, and we needed a true champion that is a true workhorse in the DBW, and we all know RJ Carnage was a great champion, but
Yep.
he's gone now. Uh, So it leads to me, and I wanted to really like showcase this championship and give a vein that no one will ever forget. But unfortunately, DBW couldn't show the money
That's
to make
probably
that
the
happen.
case. And again, I have a bunch of comments. I'm going to get to more people in a second. But, you said something interesting, and I wasn't going to ask your thoughts on this, but I might as well, because you mentioned a number of different guys who were veterans and they've been around a while, and you see this sometimes in pro wrestling. I do a lot of pro wrestling, obviously in the UK especially, and I have a guy coming on in Vito Fratelli Wednesday night who wrestled Alexander Hammerstone. He was in the MLW and he was the
Mhm.
champion there in TJP. So I kind of get the vibe, a sense of where you're going with this. But I mean, when you talk about veterans that maybe are coming in and trying to take up a spot from someone like yourself, who's done a lot, who's been an institution in DBW, you feel that in some ways that these veterans, as you might want to say, kind of don't know when to kind of move on and pass the torch? Is that what you're trying to say here almost, Champ?
I honestly think it's a little disrespectful for the fans and for the roster members of DBW who actually prove themselves and fight hard, tooth and nail, blood, sweat, and tears just to get to nowhere. Like I've we've always had this saying in DBW that we're the land of opportunity. But the land of opportunity is basically the retirement home because we just allow these old men to come in and be the top guy in the company. Like if you look now, Mr. Judgment, who is the champion, he's what, like 800 years old? He's older than
I wasn't going
Tom.
to say anything because I
Like,
don't know if you're aware of this or not, but I have the champion on Thursday night. So I really don't want to say anything negative toward the champion because I obviously want to be very, very respectful these days on Sportswire because we're trying to structure things a little differently. I'm trying to give everybody a fair shake. So, I mean, I guess I was trying to say more or less that I'm going to plead the fifth on that.
hopefully the show is not past his bedtime because he does have a bedtime being
So are
that
you
old.
saying he's in like Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair territory back in the 90s and 2000s where they just, I guess, couldn't know when to hang it up or father time had passed them by and they couldn't let go almost?
Listen, I'm not saying a whole lot, but yeah, I'm just gonna stop right here before I get even more trouble, you know?
Yeah, listen, and that's why I'm actually trying to plead the fifth on some of
I,
those
I,
things
I
here.
respect it. I respect it, Tom.
Okay, because I have a ton of DBW shows coming up on Sportswire, so I think we're going to be regularly covering the company. So the last thing I want to do out there is go anger a town because obviously we had Mr. Havoc on not too long ago, and the coach obviously who we have on here on Sportswire. I know a lot of these different guys, so I want to say hello to my guest next Tuesday, a man who you actually interviewed when you had your own show, which I'll get to later on. That is Mr. Brandon Castellati. Of course, Brandon is a huge part of DBW and some other companies
Yes.
like VTW. We're going to get to. I want to say hello to that. And this individual, who I think might be
Mhm,
related to somebody I just mentioned, says hello. He
mhm.
is also a champion in DBW, I think, who might be related to that person. Says
I'm
Mr.
fairly
Wakefield.
known of this man's work.
You do. You do.
Yes, I love him.
I want to say hello here to Jane because Jane says, "How does it feel to have the goat on your show?"
Mm.
Listen, man, I'm a Chase Wakefield fangirl. Well, I mean, I'm happy to have him. I mean, anything you want to say to your fans out there, especially the ladies? I mean, I'll give you credit because usually Sportswire is, how can I put this, like in rock and roll terms, it's like a sausage fest. So basically, the fact that we have a female on here, like I can say it because it's very.
Already a change in tables, you know, like the tables have been turned. I
About
bring on
time.
the
I mean, I've
women.
been doing this for 5 years. Usually, we don't see too many females on the show.
There's a first for everything, Tom.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you, Jane, for tuning in here. I have a question here from Mr. Remington Stryker, of course, who's a part of things in the IMF. DBW is invited to Summer Bash in July, and I guess he was wondering to see if DBW would come on, but that's a question I'd have to ask management about because you're contractually no longer obligated to DBW.
See, I don't know about DBW, but me as a free agent, well, not anymore since I'm with BTW. I'm more than likely. I would love to come.
You would.
Just yeah, just shoot me the DM on Instagram, Twitter.
Chase
We'll be able.
Wakefield underscore PW, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Chase Wakefield _PW. You can also follow him on YouTube as well at Chase Wakefield. So, Mr.
Yes.
Stryker, if you do want to get in
I
touch,
I am not like CJ Black. I will not ask for a limousine. I will not ask for travel. I won't even ask for a booking fee either. Uh, so
that's so
I'm more.
kind of you because you're actually a pro wrestler. Usually these guys come on and why so kind tonight?
See, one of the things that I really structure myself is if there is a show that is free, if it's a backyard wrestling show, if it's on the terms that I like, if it's a charity show, anything like that, I do it for free.
Sure.
But if it is a show that is admission, I do ask. But
I would
usually,
hope so because I mean obviously
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's
yeah.
a gate.
Usually, if it's a free show or if it's a yard show that I am like very interested in, I'm willing to do.
Okay. Well, I think Summer Bash, if I could plug for a second, and I'm sure Mr. Stryker won't mind me doing this. I think what's great about Summer Bash, which will be July 5th to the 7th in 2024 next year, is I've kind of compared it to almost like when Ozzy had started Ozfest because
Hmm.
years ago, Lollapalooza had started, and Ozzy had actually wanted to get on Lollapalooza. Here was Ozzy, who's the Prince of Darkness. He's obviously the founder of heavy metal, and you would think Lollapalooza would want Ozzy. He had the record sales, all this stuff, but they kind of refused him. So, kind of to spite Lollapalooza, Ozzy had started Ozfest, which got all the heavy metal bands of the day in the 90s and the 2000s. And he would have this concert which brought people together, which I kind of think the idea of Summer Bash is the same thing to bring all the different wrestlers, whether it's underground, backyard, maybe some indies or pro guys, and have them for 3 nights, 3 days, and just see who's the best. Have a great time, whether it's all these different companies out there DBW, IMF, DKW, WCE, ROEW. I mean, it's a long list of companies out there. And I think the premise of this is to do very similar to what Ozzy did back in the 90s with Ozfest. So we have here a bunch of more comments. Brandon says, sweet deal. I say hello to Brandon. I think, Brandon, we're on next Tuesday around 8 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. Also, Remington wants to say Omen isn't on. Yeah, but Omen already commented, Remington. And I just plugged, by the way, Summer Bash. So I appreciate that you tuning in. Dawn's March is still one of the best factions in DPW.
Yeah.
That was when you were the world champion, if I'm not mistaken. Now, do you want
Yes,
to talk
sir.
about those days? Talk about those days because
I would
you
I would
kind of
love
had
to.
quite a stable. So let's talk about that for a second.
Before we actually get to the Dawn's March, you did bring up the whole Ozfest thing, and
Yes.
I actually had a show planned about whenever COVID was happening. Like it was like the main thing, the pandemic was going crazy.
Yep.
I had the Adam Anderson's barbecue invitational.
Oh, really?
And
So what was that like? Talk about that.
yeah, yeah. So basically, I took inspiration from GCW's Backyard Wrestling. Um,
Sure.
basically try to go all out, grab people from the new era, from the old era of backyard wrestling, people who have been in the indies that are willing to come back to the yard for one show only. And
Okay.
we had this whole idea of a Great Wall of White Claw as the main as like the main selling point, and we would have like trampolines, an actual ring. But unfortunately, due to the COVID laws in the state of Maryland, which was whenever I was going to have it, we couldn't have any parties bigger than like 5 people at the time.
I'm in New York, and I can tell you that it
It
was
was
like
awful.
it was terrible. I remember even in New York, I remember I met one of my friends in Brooklyn, and it was like we couldn't almost like go inside to the
Yeah,
restaurant, and then it was like we would sit outside in the table, and people were looking at us like. So I don't ever want to think about COVID again.
exactly.
COVID, if you
And
were in New York, Maryland, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, if
PA,
you were
it
in
was
these
all
states,
bad.
it was a nightmare. It was a
Yeah,
nightmare.
yeah. And we were really pushing for a lot of the GBYWN stories to come in, like people like Matt Demorest, people like Alex Zane, the Stepdads, a bunch of big name backyarders back in the day who, as you know, Alex Zane's been to like WWE, he's
Yep.
been to GCW, like all these people, and then merged them with a lot of the new stories from like DBW, BTW. I even had Jack Delta interested. I even had all kinds of people from
Well, you
every.
were big when you had Jack Delta interested, which is a big deal.
Yes. Jack Delta, I love that man. Yeah, I
Same
wish.
here, and I want to give a big shout out to Jack Delta because I know a
Yes.
lot has been said about Jack Delta, but I want to say thank you, Jack Delta, for all you've done really for wrestling and backyard wrestling, for putting your body out there, and definitely hope to see you out there again one day. And definitely, I've spoken with Mr. Delta in the past few days, and I wish him very well, and I believe we'll see him again on Sportswire very soon. So big
Yeah,
shout out
he
to Jack
was
Delta.
he was the one that really got me into a lot of backyard wrestling feds that aren't in this community of BTW and DBW and
Well,
KBW.
ESW, I mean, hello.
Yeah, but it's just one of those things that it was spur of the moment, and it'll probably never happen again. But we had plans. We was this close. We were this close.
Yeah, COVID is one of those things, and I want to say before I get to more comments and bring up the Dawn's March, a buddy of mine who I was supposed to meet from Long Island, Jason Getz, says the Reverend Tom Bryce should get in the ring. Well, I unfortunately I'm going to be totally sure because I'm speaking with a pro wrestler right now. I am not a trained wrestler, and the best thing I can do is talk on the microphone. So you might want to see the trained pros here, like Mr. Chase Wakefield and others who can go in the ring. But Jason, I hope you're well out there. I hope your summer is treating you well over in Clark High School in Long Island in the
Oh
friendly
wow.
confines. Yeah, he's in suburban Long Island. Jason's a good dude. Jason is a good dude, and I still am disappointed I haven't met him yet, but I'm sure I'll meet him soon on Long Island. But Dawn's March is where you kind of cut your teeth and had a lot of your success in DBW, holding the world title, building a faction that even to this day, I think in DBW history is one of the more important groups. Maybe talk about the Dawn's March for us.
Yeah, so the Dawn's March was really a kind of a fever dream in a sense. The main premise was just a bunch of bounty hunters looking for like the biggest names in backyard wrestling and putting bounties in their head and going out and facing them and eventually becoming this like almost like the Jack Delta of factions, going to like all these other places, gathering all these people from other places, merging into one and being like this huge immersed group. So when we had the plans to officially debut this, we were talking to Navon McDonald, who has a character named Novin, and Novin is a very, very in our community is a very protected character. He's only lost 8 times in like 5 to 6 years,
So
maybe
it's like
even
the
more.
Undertaker, basically.
Basically, yeah. And many people that he's defeated was people like Jordan Oliver, Mr. Judgment, all these big names, and we wanted to debut by attacking Novin in the match that he's most known for, a body bag match, and attacking and basically sealing this big feud that we have going on, and being one of the few people to ever beat Novin.
Wow. So what was that experience like going against a guy and then kind of doing something almost in a way, kind of like what Brock Lesnar did to The Undertaker at WrestleMania 29? I mean, talk about that.
So facing Novin in general was probably one of the scariest moments in wrestling for me at the time, just because of how intimidating this man is
Oh,
whenever
sure, sure.
whenever he puts on that face paint, he like clicks into a whole different man. And
Mm.
there were times in the match where I just look at him and he has this crazed, bloodthirsty look. And I'm like, is this real? Is what's going on? And no, it was such a fun time wrestling Novin for the first time, and that was probably the biggest match in my career at the time. And pitching the idea of beating Novin to Navon was almost blasphemy for him because he's never really had many people beat him.
So let me ask you a follow-up question to that as we're here with pro wrestling star Chase Wakefield, the Bitcoin billionaire, the reigning defending DBW Hub City champion, who you can follow on Instagram at Chase Wakefield _PW. He's also got a pro wrestling tees page. He's also on YouTube as well. And my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. So you have a guy that has that much experience and who's had quite a record, quite a resume. Is there anything you learned from him, maybe outside the ring, that you apply to kind of where you're going on this journey currently?
I think honestly, in every single match that I've been in and what I've learned from doing independent wrestling was every match you do is a learning session. Is
Sure,
you will
sure.
always learn something new after every match. And what I learned at that Nova match was to really emphasize your character in a sense. Really, because back then I wasn't like Adam Anderson was nothing. There was no structure to it. It was just, oh, he has a nickname and that's it. And it's like I feel like Novin really helped me branch out to an actual character for Adam Anderson at the time, which was the Unkillable. And the fact that I took so much like brutal blows really showed that I was unkillable. And we kind of rolled the ball when it came to rolling with that gimmick. And I think that Nova match helped prove that I can actually have a character going with Adam Anderson.
So the depth of your character is what you learn most, because
Yeah,
in order for you to have longevity and go to the places that you wanted, you had to have a character that people could kind of follow no matter wherever you go.
correct, correct.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I want to get to some more comments here. Obviously, Brandon talks about us next Tuesday. Very much excited to speak with Brandon. And Brandon also has a YouTube page. He's at Crispy1000, so make sure you follow him. And Brandon's obviously doing a lot of great things. I'm really excited to speak with him and his journey as well here. So I touched upon it in the fact that you've done a number of different things in DBW. You've been a tag team champion. Twice you had held the number one contender championship, almost like a money in the bank, and you've been the company's standard bearer. So I'm curious in what did it mean to you to be the DBW world champion?
That's a great question.
I tried.
I
I
think
tried.
honestly, I think honestly, when it comes to being the top champion of a company, is really in a sense of who you are backstage.
Okay.
Um, I feel like me becoming that champion was a proven test that I deserve to really take the take the horns of this bull that is the DBW World Championship, and not only prove myself in ring but out of ring as well, which I helped out with at the time. We had Thunder Punch way back then, and it helped me become a better locker room leader. It also helped me become a better producer for matches. I think overall, it just helped me inside and outside the ring
It's
as
funny
that
you
champion.
said that because I had Jackson Law a couple weeks ago and he talked about the producing, editing aspect. I speak with guys in different companies, pro, yard, underground, whatever you want to call it at this point. It's almost like Baskin Robbins to me, 31 different flavors. But I mean, people talk about that aspect of it. And I mean, you a world champion of a company also that's grown leaps and bounds. I mean, the YouTube following, we're talking about 3,000 plus subscribers, matches with thousands and thousands of views, and a devoted following where the company has transitioned from, a place that was kind of like maybe your run of the mill backyard company to where you guys are pretty much running almost like a pro show almost every other week. You guys put out content with Thursday Night Thunder Punch. You've obviously put out basically kind of like your premium live event shows each month. And so when you're the champion in this transition, did that make it A, maybe extra difficult, or B, maybe extra special because at the time you were the champion, the company is starting to evolve a bit? I mean, talk about that for a second.
I feel like it was more or less a thin line of being special and difficult
Okay,
because being in DBW for as long as I have, I've
sure.
been through every single evolution that DBW has been in, and it's honestly so special seeing DBW be where it's at right now. And on that other spectrum of it being very difficult, it's really stepping up because we have new talent come in from all over, from North Carolina, New York, Rhode Island, Long Island,
West
all
Virginia.
West Virginia. We have all this new talent who has a track record of being great. And then here's me, the champion, who doesn't really necessarily have that track record just yet. And it's almost like, holy crap, I got to really step up here. I really got to prove that I actually belong in here, let alone be the champion.
In a way, did it make it maybe more difficult or kind of put pressure on you? Because if you look at the roster in DBW, we have indie guys come in and out. We have places. I mean, we had Roland Havoc on. He wrestles Adam Jones from North Carolina, well documented. You've had your share of competitors. I'm going to get to VTW in a little while as well. But did it make it maybe more putting more pressure on you, if that makes sense?
Most definitely, because after seeing a lot of these guys come in and shine in DBW, it was almost like eye-opening for me of how much I needed to improve on myself, let alone improve uh, everyone else that kind of is on that same journey as I was.
That definitely makes a lot of sense here. Let me get to some more comments. Brandon would like to say, if it wasn't for you, I would never have gone to DBW, and I'm glad that Brandon is in DBW because I got a chance to speak with him next Tuesday, and I'm really, really excited because Brandon has a great look. He does a lot of great things in the ring. He's a
Yes.
great talker, and this is a guy that very well could be the DBW world champion in the near and distant future. I think I know this is D-Lock says Chase has a bright future and loves seeing him improve each and every time in the ring. You said something about being a locker room guy, and you're still a relatively young guy, but you certainly, at least outside the ring, are very mature. Do you feel it was important for you to kind of be a locker room leader? Because a lot of guys in your spot and a lot of guys, even for your age, really wouldn't look to that. I mean, I speak with a lot of guys in England who are, young guy like you, probably in their 20s, and, they're not that. I mean, they might have the same resume as you, no question, but that's just not who they are. So, I mean, talk about maybe making that transition outside the ring where you became a guy that was kind of maybe the standard bearer and locker room leader of a DBW.
I can definitely say before we became more serious as a company, I was nowhere near the locker room leader as I am today. I was very introverted. I didn't really talk to many people at the time. The only thing I really talked to was the person I was wrestling.
Okay.
And nowadays, I feel like I can be not necessarily a leader for the people, but someone you can always go up to and talk to about curious ideas. And I don't really necessarily look at myself as a true leader. I just look at myself as the guy you can always look to where the leader you don't agree with. You can always be like, oh, I don't agree with what the leader says, but I can talk to Chase and he can help me make sense of this.
All right, so I'm gonna ask you a question, and I'm gonna do this because I know eventually I'll get people to watch and listen to this who might be whether they're yarders or maybe
Mhm.
some different wrestlers I speak with that pop in and out on Sportswire because they always find when I speak to wrestlers very fascinating. What advice would you give to some of your peers?
Honestly, really market yourself. Marketing is the number one thing to get you to places. If it
Okay.
wasn't for me building a resume for my wrestling, if it wasn't for me making a Google Drive of your promo photos, your resume, even a promo video
Oh, I
of
think
like
I
an
think you said there
example.
was one DBW spot. I think it was I forget who it was that was basically doing something on you. You said they're not promos though.
Yeah, yeah. That
That
I
was
do
funny.
I do try to not necessarily call it promos
Uh huh.
because it really breaks the fourth wall in a sense.
I
I
was gonna
call
say it
them
always
response
reminds me of
videos
Zach Morris
or
and Saved by the Bell when he'd always go
yeah,
timeout and kind of like break the fourth wall. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But in my opinion, as much as you market yourself, the further you'll get. Because I've marketed myself multiple times and it's gotten me to independent shows. It's gotten me to VTW because I helped market myself down there. Even though they have came up, I necessarily have messaged them first and shown who I really was. Um, but really just get your name out there. Like you if you really want to be who you want to be, just show everyone that.
Absolutely. No, listen, absolutely no question about that here. And Brandon would like to say, keep supporting and endorsing me so I can win the DBW World Title. Well, I'm going to bring it up. Listen, I promise you I'm going to bring it up Thursday with Mr. Judgment. I'm going to definitely bring it up with you next Tuesday. So I'm very excited about that. But we are on Sportswire Radio. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. And if you are on Sportswire Radio or on YouTube, give us a sub. We're at Sportswire Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player. I'm also on Instagram at the Sports Report 2021. I'll have a number of shows coming up here Tuesday night in particular. I think around 7 p.m. Eastern time. I am speaking with the owner and promoter of XCW Shelbyville, the longest running backyard wrestling promotion in the state of Indiana, 20 years strong. Very excited to have on Fletch. Wednesday at midnight, I'll be speaking with Vito Fratelli via California, who's got, I think, like 8 world championships last I checked. He is the real belt collector. He has been in there with the likes of Jacob Fatu, Alexander Hammerstone, TJP, a list of companies left and right in Mexico, California, you name it. He's been there. He's been with us, and I want to thank my very dear friend Darryl Johnson and Jarrell Diaz for giving me another great opportunity to speak with the champion. So excited about that. And I think Monday, right after Monday Night Raw, I'm with the ROEW World Champion, the wild card Jason Storm ahead. So a number of shows here on Sportswire Radio, and including Thursday, Mr. Judgment himself, the reigning defending DBW World Champion, who for whatever reason reminds me of another world champion I'm very good friends with in the UK called Disciple. He almost looks exactly like him. He's got the same character, he's got the same image, almost same style in the ring. I have to ask him that question. I say that with all due respect. And I also want to say hello to, speaking of people in California, my very good friend Anastasia Riznia, who's obviously listening to us out there. She's just outside of San Diego, and I want to give her my thoughts and prayers because obviously her brother Derek is going through some health issues. She's been listening to us to get through her day. So, Anastasia, I hope you're well out there. But we are here with Mr. Chase Wakefield, our DBW Hub City champion, and also Mr. Stryker. Would like to say, I want to say this. DBW and Chase Summer Bash will be having a War Games match as the main event on day 2. Now, have you ever been in a War Games style match, first of all?
No, I have not. It really piques my interest.
Okay, I guess then maybe you might be putting your name in the hat. I know that's in Ohio, by the way, which is I don't think that far from you, actually.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I'm in close to the Maryland border. It should be probably like 7 hours, but I make that trip anyways to North Carolina for BTW.
I
So
was going to get to that next. I was going to certainly get to that here. And Mr. Stryker would like to say we'd like to see DBW there, perhaps have a representative of DBW in War Games. So I think Mr. Havoc was asked that question, and Mr. Havoc, I think, was basically saying that he was considering. I'm sure I'll ask Mr. Havoc that question again. And thank you, Remington. I always love hearing from Remington Stryker. But I want to talk about Versus the World Wrestling. You want to talk about another company that has got a big following out there in the YouTube world. And you wrestled a familiar face at Summer Blast in Mr. Ace Christian, who you have a long history with. And talk about now being a part of Versus the World Wrestling. And you can follow them, VTW Wrestling, on YouTube. And what happened there with you and Ace Christian? I mean, let's talk about VTW for a little while.
perfect. I do gotta say first things first. BTW is now my home. So
What a phenomenal setup they have. I mean, you want to talk about the
yeah,
commentary was professional, the editing. I mean, I got to say, I love TBW, but this to me is like a real wrestling show. This is not, how can I put this in a very kind way? Let's say imitation. This is like a real wrestling show. First class editing, first class commentary, first class setup. I mean, what a company.
yeah. BTW from its old days has stepped up almost tenfold. The production that we have going on with BTW is, I think, second to none. But there's a lot of these companies that claim that they're the best. But in my opinion, if you guys want to take inspiration or take some notes, I think BTW is the perfect place to do so because not only we have killer matches, we have stellar production, we have stories, we have everything that you could possibly want in a YouTube wrestling show, all into one. And a lot of the guys there are independent trained. We
Yeah,
we're
you
we're
could tell
like
the flow. You could tell even just some of the other stuff I watched on Summer Blast is you could tell that there's a flow. People ask me, as I'm sure you might be aware of this. I watch a lot of wrestling these days, and I'm not talking
Mhm.
WWE, AEW, because we cover a lot of, let's say, independents, maybe
Yeah.
underground, back, whatever you want to call it, right? And what struck me most was visually, it was very aesthetically pleasing. What it also impressed me most was that the flow to the match and to the show, it was like a natural flow. It was almost like, how can I put it? It's like I watch a lot of movies, and there was like the storylines and kind of almost like the experience. It was very kind of easy to follow, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I want to thank everyone who does BTW for giving such a great viewing experience, not just in the
Sure.
wrestling, but in their characters too. I think we have a lot of original characters when it comes to YouTube wrestling, to current wrestling in the independents. I think we're honestly the best in North Carolina. In independent YouTube backyard, doesn't matter. I think we're one of the best, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of swayed my contract to be over to
Ah,
BTW
I
because of
see.
how great. how good VTW really is. And I will say, if you like what VTW is doing right now, we're just getting started. We're
Okay, so you're just
we
scratching the surface then.
Yeah, we have so many plans in the future, and
Well,
as you
don't tell us
know,
the plans. I tell everybody on Sportswire at this point. Don't
oh
tell
yeah,
us. Don't spoil it for us, please.
but I will say for Beach Blast, which is the show, not Summer Blast,
Yes, I'm
Beach
sorry. Yes, I
Blast,
realized that. Yes,
we did tease Halloween Hangover, which is this is the first show that I have ever been where every single competitor is going to be trapped in a steel cage. Every single match is a steel cage match,
wow. So, I
and
mean, how do you prepare for something like that then?
I honestly have no clue. I'm still trying to figure that out on my own. I've never been in such a structure like a steel cage, but I'm excited to see what's ahead of me, who I will wrestle. I think it's gonna be a wonderful time.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you a few more questions on VTW, but I also want to say hello to my friend, another independent wrestler in the UK who's up at, I guess, would be 2:41 a.m. UK
Oof.
time. That is Daniel Bania. Daniel is always with me on Sports. Anytime I talk wrestling, Daniel is one of my favorites, along with the Big Cheese Logan, and it's usually Slugger Hampton, somebody else like that. And did Tom submit? No, I didn't submit. I think you're the one that needs to figure out tapping out or submitting. But we'll ask about ROEW TV later on here with CJ Black. But I have to ask you, when it comes to VTW, and you've got a company where you see a lot of your peers from DBW over there, what's that experience like? Because I do a lot of stuff in England, and there are certain companies that the talents will kind of cross over with the promoter. I don't know if that was intended with VTW, but I'll do stuff with Daniel will know this. Let's say like GTM in Bolton Town Wrestling, or the LWF in Bolton Town Wrestling, KOW and Odyssey Pro Wrestling. These companies kind of either they work because the promoters have a relationship or they're close in proximity. Usually it's a combination of both. CCW and GTM were doing the same thing for a while. CCW and Arcadian Wrestling, those are some of our UK supporters. So what is it like when you're wrestling with some of your peers in DBW and VTW?
I will say, first things first, catering, it is kind of a little awkward seeing some of my past coworkers. It's almost like running into current coworkers at a supermarket. It's a little awkward, but other than that, I think it's great for both brands,
Uh-huh.
DBW and VTW, because not only we have tremendous wrestlers in DBW, we also have tremendous wrestlers in VTW, and them crossing over gives us the best content possible. As you know from Asher Christ and the Blaze Ace Christian, like they're DBW guys, but they perform just as well, if not better, at VTW.
I'm curious about this here in the fact that you've wrestled in a number of different states and you've done it in a lot of indie companies and you've
Hmm.
actually gone on this journey. And I find that fascinating. And I have people out here that I know are going to tune into this and they're going to maybe want to be curious about that. So, what have you learned in your own experiences in wrestling across the Northeast and the Mid Atlantic?
When it comes to independent, I feel like the one big thing I've learned the most is just how different people view wrestling in a perspective. I've wrestled a lot of veterans who have been doing this for longer than I've been alive. I've met WWE alumni like Bill Bain. Uh, I've met like a lot of these veterans, and the way
Sure.
that they view wrestling is completely different than what I view wrestling. And the way that they talk about wrestling, the way that they really structure out wrestling is so it's like a 360 change.
It's funny you said that because there's a friend of mine that has become a kind of a big deal in the UK. His name is RP Davis. He was a boxing champion. He's won 3 world titles in the UK. He's kind of like probably on his way to at least probably being scouted, if not scouted already. And he was close with a guy you might have heard of named William Regal. And I would
Yeah.
ask him a lot, RPD, about this. And I would say, well, what would you say to William Regal? What would you get to him in terms of advice? Or, how much would you try to soak up? So I would have to ask you the same question. And you're in locker rooms now, which is different than being in a yard, different being on an
Mhm.
underground show, or even a DBW show. Now, we love DBW, but there's a different environment when you're on an indie show with guys that have actually gone on to the big time. So, I mean, what advice do you try to take away when you're in those moments to kind of help you on your own journey?
I think honestly, it's soak up enough information as you can. Really talk to a lot of these guys, ask how they prepare for matches, ask how they structure their matches. Really get as much information as possible because earlier, as I said, wrestling is more of a learning experience
I've
than
always said
an
throughout
actual
my
sport.
5 years, it's basically the equivalent of an apprenticeship.
Yes,
Wrestling is a place where you've got to almost learn from somebody in order to get that knowledge, in order for you to be able to go on with your career. And then when you have that chance, you need to be able to share that knowledge with the people that are kind of in your
exactly.
spot years later.
Yes. And I feel like the people that I've been with so far have taught me so much that I could ever possibly imagine if I would have stayed in the underground or like in the yard or anything like that. And I like to really kind of transport my information to people who really don't know what it's truly like. Because a lot of underground people, a lot of yarders, they just take a lot of the information they've learned in the ring from YouTube, and a lot of these seminars and a lot of these locker room moments you don't get from YouTube.
No, no, and it's. I'm glad you said that because I'm friends obviously with a number of different guys. RP Davis, Rick Marcus, a few different people. I don't want to say what their roles are in the UK in terms of
Mhm.
breaking the fourth wall, but they run promotions and they're also
Yeah,
on-screen talents. And a lot what I've heard, at least in the UK, I sort of know what it's like in the US, but I know in the UK what gets said a lot is almost guys kind of might have like the ring psychology is where a lot of this stuff comes in most. So maybe you want to talk about maybe what do you learn and kind of the acronyms I hear most is about ring psychology and less is more. Do you want to talk about that for some of the different people here tonight?
yeah, sure. One of the things that really opened my eyes whenever it was like really learning about the independent side of wrestling is entrances. There's a lot of places expect heels and faces to have a set time for the entrances. And don't quote me on this. It's I have
I'll ask
happened
Vito Fratelli Wednesday night. I'll make sure to ask Mr. Fratelli this.
and it's I believe for faces it's like 60 seconds for your entrance and then for
Right.
heels it's like a minute to a minute 30.
Oh wow. Okay. I would not.
And
I would
it's
have thought the other way around.
it could be the other way around. It could be like I could be
Okay.
completely off, but there is a set
Sure.
time. A lot of, especially here in West Virginia, a lot of these independent promotions expect you to have that time set down, and they don't want no less, no more. They just want that almost exact time. And other than that, it's a lot of in-ring terms that I have never heard in my life, like before I got into the independents, like the blade of like when someone like busts themselves open.
Yeah, I think I saw this story. I'm trying to think who was saying it. I forget it was one of these podcasts I was listening to, and they were talking about the blading part. And I was
Yeah,
like, I didn't realize it was that like in depth. I mean,
yeah, it's literally called a gigger is the actual term of the blade,
okay.
and I was like, I have never heard that in my entire life,
I mean,
let
I've heard
alone
that guys would sometimes, I guess, have the razor underneath their tongue. I've heard guys
yeah.
will go out on a spot and they'll kind of like maybe they'll hide under the apron and they'll cut their head.
Oh yeah.
I've
I
heard some
will
weird
say
stuff
you
before.
I will say you will never catch me use a gigger in my life. I will never cut myself open. That is a no-go for me.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to, I think it was Eric Bischoff's 83 Weeks podcast, and he was talking about the Australian tour between Hogan and Flair. And he was talking about the fact that Hogan was basically at that point couldn't do much in the ring. It was, I think, some of his last matches he ever had. And what
Oh
wound
yeah.
up happening was he wound up bleeding to kind of add to the match because he couldn't take any bumps. And I'm always kind of like fascinated how these guys will kind of cut themselves, and you never really know. And in terms of just how deep that could be, and what that could lead to. And obviously, you can always tell. I think the running line is you can always tell a wrestler's forehead versus someone else's forehead.
Yes.
Abdullah the Butcher is always the the biggest comparison. But I was curious coming back to VTW. You had said this, and it was maybe a little while ago. You said this that one of your more recent feuds with D'Lo Smith was one of the best of your career. Could you talk about that for the audience and why you felt that way?
Oh yeah, D'Lo Smith, I think, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated guys right now. He has the look of a champion, he has the charisma of a champion, and just facing him, there was a show called Best in the Yard 4, and this
Okay, yes,
happened
I did see that. Yes,
about 6 to 7 years ago, I believe. I can't remember the time.
I think
Me
you
and
mentioned it in
D'Lo,
one of your promos, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, I believe it was for Ultimate Redemption, the
Yes.
build up. So that was the first time we ever went one-on-one, was at Best in the Yard 4. It was the pre-show, and we killed it. We absolutely killed it. It was my most memorable match because I didn't have Novin. I didn't have anything like that. It was my most memorable match. And then all these years later, we go to Ultimate Redemption where I'm facing this brand new D'Lo, and I don't remember. I think I posted on Twitter a photo of Best in Yard 4
Yeah,
with
I
the
saw that.
photo
Yes, I
of
saw that.
Ultimate Redemption, and so much has changed between the two of us. And I think in the Ultimate Redemption match, it really showed that both of us had matured as wrestlers and really amplified our Best in the Yard 4 match to even more.
What does that mean to you to have had that kind of feud in terms of two things? A, let's say VTW, where you go from here, and maybe B, for the rest of your career, to have a feud like that that does so much for you in a number of different facets. You want to talk about that for the audience?
Yeah, totally. One of the big things that really showed in Ultimate Redemption was not only a kind of a pat on the back for how good we have became as wrestlers, how mentally we've grew, how our ring psychology was, and I think now going forward, it really puts a like a target on both of our backs, showing that hey, we can really be up with some of these people like D-Lock, like Zach Daniels, like Aaron Jones. We can be up at
Aaron
that
Jones, we
level with
saw on
them.
DBW TV against Havoc. We
Yes,
saw that
sir. Yes,
I
sir.
think 2 months ago, I want to say.
Such a phenomenal match those two had.
Yep.
But those that really blew off a lid of potential that the both of us have, where we can maybe be BTW World Champs at some point in the future. That
Oh,
really
I have no
kicked
doubt
things
about
off.
that. I definitely have no doubt about that, and I want to make sure I
Now,
plug.
as for D-Lock, I might be a little scared to face D-Lock because of his chops, but
Oh, well, those
uh,
chops. I'll tell you what. They judge somebody. They always say in wrestling that you judge somebody based off your chops. So if those chops hurt,
that man can chop the soul out of people. It's
Oh, I
crazy.
have no doubt about that. I definitely have no doubt. And I want to make sure I plug again our friends over at Versus the World Wrestling. You can follow them on Twitter at VTW Wrestling. Also YouTube at VTW Wrestling. That's where you can see all match content, shows, you name it. You can see obviously our very good friend Mr. Chase Wakefield on there as well. They've got over almost 2,000 subscribers, so please make sure you support them. Actually 4,000. I need to get my eyes examined, but it's just about almost 4,000 subscribers, over 3,700. They are based out of North Carolina. They've got some big things coming up. You have Vindication returning later this month. Halloween Hangover is coming up at the next big premium live event. Every match is going to be held inside of a steel cage. Beach Blast premiered last week, so go out there and check it out if you haven't already. And of course, Chase Wakefield will be a part of that. He's a Chase Wakefield _PW on Instagram as well. And I did want to ask you also about, while I had a chance, and you had your own podcast, and what was that experience like, and what did you learn from trying your own show last year?
Honestly, I had a lot of fun with it, and I've really toyed the fact of bringing it back.
Okay.
For those that don't know, it was called the Matthew Burford Experience, which was my government name, and I was trying to
I wasn't going
kind
to
of
ask.
yeah, you're good, you're good. I really wanted to pull the curtain back and talk to a lot of these yarders like it was no kayfabe, no in character. I just wanted to really have people know who they really are as a person. So when they see them in the ring, they can really relate to the people that are actually in the ring, you know. And overall, I had a lot of fun. I might try to bring it back.
I
Not
think
too
you should
podcast.
because James Taylor does his own show, the Nemesis Session, which is going on out there live, and Captain Law had his own podcast for a while.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think that there's a lot of people out there that kind of want to hear other wrestlers talk to other wrestlers. I think that there's a huge audience for it. I mean, I listen to podcasts religiously, especially now when I'm working overnight, and I love to hear other wrestlers talk to one another. So, I mean, did you learn anything about maybe A, who you were as a person, and maybe B, as a wrestler? Did you learn anything from these experiences in that way?
I think honestly, the main thing that I learned from a lot of these podcasts is just how to really structure talking to people on one-on-ones. Because a lot of times when you're really having an in-depth conversation with someone, it usually kind of backs into like a bunch of mumble jumble. And
There's
really
got to be a
structuring the
flow. Listen,
podcast.
you got to
Yeah.
listen. I've been doing this for 5 years, so I'm going to give basically my thoughts. You could do whatever you want with it because obviously you're a pro wrestler. You know a lot better than me. You've got a lot more fans, but you got to have a flow to a podcast because what you can kind of tell. Like I've listened to, let's say, like in England, there was a couple of different podcasters that were doing something similar to me, and you could tell that A, when the person hasn't done their research, B, when they don't know who the person is, and C, there's that like awkward moments of silence where they're kind of like waiting for the transition. So I think those are the most important things. I think not just for any wrestling podcast, but for any show in general. You can tell when somebody is maybe experienced like me versus somebody who's not because you can tell usually like when you have those no moments of silence, the flow is good, the person knows what they're talking about and they want to talk to the person. So that's kind of what I see. I mean, you may have a different experience from when you've done your shows, but those are some of the things I see.
Okay, yeah, I definitely agree with you when it comes to state of flow, when it comes to shows, because for me, I hate like that awkward silence.
Oh
Like
my
I,
God! Listen, there was a guy. I really don't want. I do not want to bury people right now because that's the whole thing right now in the backyard and in pro scene. But there was a guy that he actually stopped doing these, and he would do these podcasts, and he'd have these British pro wrestlers on, which is actually it's a big scene there, and I've been a part of it for about 3 years. And he would go on and he would do these interviews, and he would not ask them about their careers, but ask them what would be their fantasy SmackDown bookings and what would be their favorite WWE matches. I'm like, I want to hear their career about what they've done. And, so that's when you can tell really like somebody's just doing it just because they want to speak with somebody, not when they really, are immersed. And so those are some of the
yeah.
things that I really hate when somebody has a podcast and they bring somebody on and like they don't want to talk about what they've done. I mean, I don't want to hear what you think. I don't want to hear what like you might have an outside interest. Let's talk about your journey. I think that's the most important things for A, the host, and B, the listener.
I totally agree with that. And another thing that I hate the most when it comes to that awkward silence, especially in phone calls,
Oh,
like
I used to
it's the
do.
worst.
I actually the first year and a half. I even took calls when I was on the radio a couple years ago. We were really pushing the internet radio dial, and I would have people call in, or I would be on the call with somebody, like doing like they would be
Yeah,
speaking, and you'd have that was the worst when you have the phone, and it would kind of be like nobody knew when to kind of move in.
exactly.
That's the worst.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I just like shrivel up as like like being very introverted.
Well,
Hearing no silence is bad.
Well, luckily, I always say I'm not trained to do podcasting, but because I have a background in politics and all I know almost
Mm.
all of my entire life since I'm out of high school is public speaking. So I luckily, by kind of that, know how to transition. But speaking of things on the transition, I have to ask you because I was talking to you about this off there. Now, you call yourself the Bitcoin billionaire. I have to tell you this funny story because this was back in 2016. I was actually asked to invest in Bitcoin before Bitcoin really skyrocketed. Now, I wound up getting into Bitcoin. I actually wound up making, I want to say it made when I sold Bitcoin maybe about $15,000 or $16,000 in profit. So I did very well in Bitcoin. But if I had got into when the time I was asked to invest in Bitcoin, This had to have been, I want to say December of 2016. I remember it very well. I was in Lower Manhattan, and somebody had asked me, I want you, I like you. You're a great guy. If you listen to me, you're going to make from when I invested to when I actually did do it and what I should have had done it, I would have made, instead of about 15 grand, probably about $200,000 to $250,000 profit. So I will tell you, I actually do have a little of experience in Bitcoin. I thought you would find that funny because you are the Bitcoin billionaire. I could have been almost a Bitcoin millionaire.
Listen, I have a funny story about that too. When I originally heard about Bitcoin, which this was like 10 years ago, like
Okay, I know where this
it,
is going. I've probably heard the same story. Go ahead.
so I was like 12, 13 years old at the
Okay.
time.
All right.
I told my parents to get into Bitcoin. I was like, you should buy it, at least buy me some Bitcoin. Like buy $20
What
of
did they
it.
say? What did your parents say? Because I know where it's
Oh,
going to go, but go ahead.
they're
What did
like
they say?
they're like, oh, that's just a scam. That's just you only do that for you only buy that on the black market, like all this. I'm like, no, it's gonna be this thing. But of course, since I was like a teenager, like just became a teenager, I really didn't get through them in a
Well,
sense.
listen, I have a friend of mine, a buddy of mine, Steve Saperstein, who I did some work for in one of my past lives, and he actually knows somebody that invested in Bitcoin. I think it was I think Bitcoin was formed in like 2010, 2011, maybe around
Mhm.
2013. But yeah, listen, you got a nice polite note from your parents. I grew up in Brooklyn, and if I had asked my parents, let's say years ago, if I wanted to get into a thing called Bitcoin, I probably either A, would have got the belt, or B, I would have got slapped upside my face. And I probably deserved most of that stuff. I probably still do deserve some of that if you ask CJ Black. But I mean, obviously, that would have been the answer. But yeah, Bitcoin, I thought it was so fascinating because you are the Bitcoin billionaire and you're from the land of the NFT. So what is the land of the NFTs like?
It's the metaverse, man. It's truly it's sometimes not the greatest thing, but it's almost like living in like Skid Row in a sense. It's almost like living in LA where everything is just so chaotic and it's so fast moving in a sense. And the whole Web3 thing, I'm going to kind of get into the story of how Chase Wakefield really came through.
Let's talk about it because I'd love to know because, again, we spoke a lot about Bitcoin here just now.
Chase Wakefield honestly is just a product of me. It's just who I really am. I've been into crypto, I've been into Bitcoin for 10 years now.
Okay.
I've been through the highs and lows. I've been through the all-time highs and the all-time lows. And it's I always ask people, they always ask me, is my character exaggerated? And I say, no, it's just me. It's just who I am. I got into NFTs, all that as a hobby. And when I was making Chase Wakefield, I just wanted to turn my hobby into something that everyone else can see in a sense.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you said that because now you got me thinking about because I still have my Coinbase account, and I wish
Mm,
I would have kept Bitcoin. I mean, I did sell, and obviously, as I just said, I made a decent amount of money, but I still own Litecoin. I own 22 Litecoins. I own Dogecoin.
okay.
I own Crypto.com, which I don't know why I still own. I own another number of like little smaller coins. So I mean, I have
Uh,
a portfolio, but the reason that I own them still is because I don't need the money to sell them. I'm just kind of like looking to
exactly.
have them now. So I think now crypto. See, I think there was a time, and I don't want to spend too long on crypto. I'm going to come back to wrestling in a second, but I
Oh
think
yeah.
crypto. There was a period where like a lot of little old ladies were thinking, "Hey, I'm going to invest like 40 grand of my life savings, and then like next week make like 400 grand." When crypto, it doesn't work out that way.
It's a long process, and a lot of people don't really see it as a long process. They see a lot of these influencers really like say, "Oh, I bought Dogecoin in 2013, and a week later, I'm a billionaire."
Yeah. And then
And
there was Ethereum was the other one. One of my
Ethereum,
buddies
yeah,
was very big into Ethereum. He was just like, and then Ripple. It was Ripple,
yeah,
Ethereum, Dogecoin. I mean, it was all those alt. It was the altcoin market for a while.
yes, sir.
Yeah, those were the days here. But Daniel Banner wants to say a couple things. Nice to meet a fellow wrestler, Chase, and I hope to meet like-minded wrestlers like himself. He's obviously training in GT Ministries, so I
Okay.
appreciate Daniel. And Daniel, I didn't realize that I founded. No, he said. I think he's telling that he found his catchphrase. Okay, so his catchphrase is "It's the cosplay way." Okay,
The cosplay way.
cosplay
Okay.
way. Yeah, I haven't quite got into the cosplay thing. I mean, you probably know a little more than me. I have another wrestler in England who's like got a massive following in the cosplay scene, but I haven't quite gotten into that. So obviously, you're from the metaverse. You're from the land of NFTs. You're the double B, and then your other thing is there's two forms of taxes. You can pay them or evade them. So you want to talk about which one that
Yes.
people should do?
So I do have this catchphrase. You almost got it, but this whole
I
catchphrase I
actually was
came up with.
listening to it like 4 times over, and I was like, I'm gonna at least get the concept of it. I've been using my days when I was in law class and kind of remembering when I had to like remember a phrase, and I would at least get close enough down that my professor would kind of say, "Okay,
Yeah.
you got the hang of it. Get out of here."
Yeah, that's close. So basically, my whole catchphrase was, for those who may not know or too stupid to find out, I am your wrestler's favorite wrestler, double B guaranteed, Bitcoin billionaire Chase Wakefield, and there are two things in life that are certain. One, taxes, whether you evade them or pay them. And number two, my net worth being bigger than you. And judging by everyone around the room, that's not hard to do.
Well, actually, you are actually worth more than me, and I'm actually usually in your spot. So I have to say, I will give you that because usually, admittedly, I actually am worth usually more than most people I'm in a room with. So actually, for the first time in a while, I'm actually meeting someone that is worth more than me. So I appreciate that very much because it makes me feel a little more humble. Brandon would like to say, I forgot where you're from, and I love that it's still six. Yeah, it's kind of been your thing almost. I kind of think that the Chase Wakefield character, to me, like it sticks. Like I think it kind of like fits who you are. Kind of watching you in DBW and VTW, I kind of think that it is who you are almost, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I that's why I take pride in is if I always learn that if you cannot wrestle, you can always have a great character and you still can be entertaining with someone.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
I always take this one quote from John Cena. Um, when it came to someone was asking him about Dave Meltzer and his story
Oh
ratings.
God, all I do on Sportswire is hear about Meltzer. So go ahead, give it to
Yeah,
me.
I'm not going to talk about him too much,
Oh, okay,
but
all right. Thank
he
God, thank
he
God.
always he always a lot of these people gravitate towards these story ratings, and John Cena always said that he's not focused on one person's opinion rather than the person who pays the ticket, and he's more or less more focused on entertaining them rather than the people in the back who may only have criticism for them. And
Right,
I
right.
always took that to heart, and if no one likes my wrestling, I can always get away with having my character.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, I like your wrestling, and B, I'm not gonna give you a Dave Meltzer 5-star rating because I'm not in the business of giving 5-star ratings. At this
No.
point, I speak to so many wrestlers at this point, pro, underground, yard, whatever you want to call it, that the last thing I want to do is tell somebody that they have a no-star rating. In fact, one wrestler this afternoon today asked me about his match, and I won't say the name, and I was like, "No, you had a good match." Like, because I really don't want to say like anybody. There's only certain instances I'll say somebody had a bad match because it'll look so obvious, but otherwise, I don't really want to be in the business of that. But we are on Sportswire Radio having a great time here. About a half hour, 45 minutes with a very good friend, Mr. Chase Wakefield. Very honored to have Chase on. He is the Bitcoin billionaire. He is from the land of NFTs. He is from the metaverse. He is the double B. He is your wrestler's favorite wrestler. And you can find him on Chase Wakefield _PW on Instagram, on Twitter. He's also a part of our very good friends over at VTW versus the World Wrestling. They're on YouTube and they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, so many of the great platforms. VTW Wrestling, almost 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. He has also wrestled for Dominant Breakout Wrestling, a dominating Breakout Wrestling on YouTube. They have over 3,000 plus subscribers. We're patiently waiting for Double Cross to be out this week, and Chase will be a part of that, defending his DBW Hub City Championship of the World against Robert Pearson. And my name is the Reverend Tom Bryson. We're talking all things related to Chase Wakefield. Chase, I want to plug something you have. You have a Pro Wrestling Tees page, so let's plug
Yes,
that Pro
sir.
Wrestling Tees page so people can go and support you.
Hell yeah. So the link is, I believe, prowrestlingtees.com /Wakefield _ BB. But
Yes.
don't give me don't quote me on that. But the easiest way you can actually find me on Pro Wrestling Tees is just by typing in Chase Wakefield. And I'll
Yes,
pop
and
up.
also again, one more time, that link is prowrestlingtees.com/BB_Wakefield. So that is where you can go and make sure you find Chase Wakefield. And Dan, you would like to say cosplay is honestly so fun. It's like Halloween, but at conventions. So
Halloween every time of the year, you know. I honestly thought about doing cosplay, but uh, it's a lot of money to get into.
well, I mean, you can afford it. I can afford it. But I will tell you, the last time that I really dressed up for Halloween was probably when I was a little kid back in, I'm dating myself, like 1996, maybe. That was the last time I dressed up for Halloween. I was like literally little. So, I mean, I haven't
So
really done it.
for
So,
me, I used to work in Halloween haunts,
okay.
like the attractions that people go to.
Sure.
I think that's where I got my start in entertainment is by scaring the bejesus out of people, you
Well,
know?
I always like to tell people that I don't have to dress up for Halloween because look at me. Every day I get up, it is like Halloween. That's kind of the running joke here. But I wanted to ask you something, and I want to come back to DBW for a few minutes. I want to ask you about some matches you had that had a big following and a huge number of views. Is that you wrestled in New York? Now, obviously, I'm from New York, and you're one of the few wrestlers that I've had on Sportswire that's got to wrestle here. So I'm kind of curious on that moment, what that experience was like being in New York, and if you like to come back here and wrestle, so I can maybe watch it.
Oh yeah, so I have been to New York countless of times. I've been to a company called NUW, Newburgh Underground Wrestling, who is owned by Nevon McDonald, who we have talked about
Yes,
earlier.
yes.
Um, but being at NUW, the town itself is a little sketch, but
Yeah,
the
I think you're
experience
talking about, it's kinda like
Newburgh,
Newburgh. Yeah,
yes,
it's
Newburgh,
kinda
New
I wanna
York.
think it's almost like maybe central New York almost. It's kinda like
Yeah,
it's not up deep upstate, but it's kinda like central New York almost.
it's like it's pretty close to the city though.
Yeah,
At
well,
least so a
Newburgh
lot.
is yeah. Good.
It's pretty I do say it was at the time pretty sketch whenever I was there, but the wrestling itself there was so many people there that have been all over the backyard wrestling scene and the independent scene. People like Jordan Oliver got his start there. Guys like Yankee the Difference Maker was there. Guys like Brandon Castelli, Mr. Judgment, myself included, we've all been up here, and it's just a one of a kind experience because you really don't know who's going to be at NUW. It's almost like it's almost like I don't know how I can say it. Like you know how Rick in Pawn Stars say you never know what's coming through that door.
Yeah.
It's exactly like that. I believe they had
Interesting.
someone recently. I believe they had someone recently from Oregon show up.
Oh, wow, okay, okay,
It
that's interesting.
it's a very must go place if you want to be in the underground and in backyard wrestling.
So would you
And
like to go back there?
I would love to go back. A lot of times it's mostly scheduling conflicts was the main thing. But there was another company that I went up to called UWFNY.
Yeah, I
It's
think I saw that on your Instagram page, and that rings a bell a little bit because a buddy of mine wrestles for, well, before he got injured, a guy, Chris Urban, was trained by somebody you heard, I'm sure of, named Amazing Red, and he wrestles for
yeah.
House of Glory. So I've heard of UWF New York, sure.
Yes, and UWFNY, they operate up in Lake Contrine, New York,
Yeah.
which is like upstate New York.
Yeah, that's like, you're talking like, you're like deep, almost like
Yeah,
when you go up there, it's almost like you would think you're like in like Wyoming or something like that.
exactly. It's a whole like when someone says New York State, they always think the city, but there's
I'm glad you said that because I get asked this a lot because I have a background in politics. So I am one of the few people I always like to say because of my background in that world. I actually know all 62 counties in New York. I actually know them, so I can actually
oh
tell
wow.
you. I can't say I've been to every county, but I can tell you that like when you go past, I guess when you were in Newburgh, Newburgh was like Orange. When you go past like Dutchess, Orange, like those
Yeah.
counties, you're just like all those counties up there, like Cayuga, Chattaroogas,
Yep.
Erie, Ontario, Orleans, all those counties up there for Herkimer, they could be like Wyoming, literally.
It's like night and day difference. It really shocked me how New York can go from being a bustling city like New York City
Yep.
or like Newburgh to like this lush green like landscape. Like
Yep.
there's some beautiful landscapes
Got the
up there
Finger Lakes
around
up there.
there.
The Finger Lakes is
Yep,
historic for winemaking, actually, believe it or not.
exactly. And whenever I was up there, the owner actually has contacts with the manager. One, well, not manager, but one of the like operating managers for WWE. So
Okay.
a lot of times, they would get stuff from WWE. Like they have an announce table from WWE up there
Oh
now,
wow. Okay.
and I need to go up there so I can go through that announce table because that is a bucket list thing for me is to go through one of those. And I
Okay.
learned I learned that there's one sweet spot in that announce table and it's like directly in the middle and the rest of it doesn't break. So you gotta hit that
Wow.
pinpoint every
Oof.
time.
Oof. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you one more thing on New York in a second. And Brandon would like to say I was a Scorpion for a lot of conventions, and UWF New York was a great time every time I was there. Tom is a great guy, and I'll definitely ask Brandon about that. So I have to ask you almost a fun question, in a sense, about New York. Then I want
Okay.
to come back to DBW. When you've traveled to these different places, I'm almost curious. Obviously, being a New Yorker myself, was there a favorite like place you got to visit or a place to eat? Maybe if you got a chance to do anything like that when you came to New York,
Honestly,
like
I
that.
haven't I haven't really explored New York too much when it
Okay.
came to it. I just most likely just went to
The show and came
the
back. Okay.
show. Yeah.
Okay, I was just
But
curious because some guys do the whole like like I've actually had British guys come to New York and they like ask me questions and they like it becomes an experience. I was kind of curious,
yeah,
but
I've been to the city before and I can't remember the exact name of the store, but it was one of the largest like retro video games like
oh
stores.
yeah, that thing. I think it's not Midtown Comics, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
I
Yep,
went there and I absolutely loved it there because of how much of like I was into retro gaming. Like I had a
sure.
whole collection. I
Yeah,
had the
I have a
NES,
brother
Atari.
that moved overseas, and when he came back home, he was really big into that. He had all the old Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and he was big into that. He spent, a little bit of money on, going into
Oh
that.
yeah.
So he was big into that. But I wanted to ask you something about DBW. Coming back to DBW because you were a part of a match with where you retained the title, which a lot of people were really in a really controversial fashion. People had felt against Damien Fattel, which had something like 4,100 or 4,200 views
Yeah, it's
last I
up there.
checked. And talk about what that experience was like when you were involved in a match that obviously a lot of people didn't expect you to win. They didn't even think you'd win, even after how kind of the finish there itself, which I thought was a really clever finish in a lot of ways, but really more importantly, a match that a lot of people that weren't just DBW fans watched. It kind of put maybe you on the map in a lot of ways. So maybe talk about being a part of that match against Damien Fattel that had just about 4,100 plus views, and maybe what did that do for you in your career and such?
Yeah, so Damien Fatale wrestling him was so fun. I will say we didn't speak a single word to each other at all
Well, looking
during
at
the
him, I
match.
would say that's probably the best way that.
Yeah, he's kind of a scary person. And whenever he was putting me in that chokehold, I went into a really instinct mode in a sense. It was really life or death at that point. I I don't rarely get into submissions, but when I do, I'm seeing a whole different side of me where it's I'm fighting for my life. So I had to go all out and I saw an opening where I could kick my feet back and get the pinfall on him, which obviously did happen.
A lot of
And
people were like, they were seeing, your hands go like this, but the truth was you found a way to get that 1, 2, 3.
listen, people say it may be tapping, but honestly, it was not tapping. I was just trying to get a grasp of the ground, and it was very slippery at that time, so I couldn't grab the ground at all. But it still played in my favor, and I was the DBW World Champion after that.
But what did that do anything for your career, knowing that many people watched it? I mean, that's a lot of people that watched a match of yours.
I think honestly, what it did was really show that I could, like I said, I can do this. Like I belong with every other great backyard wrestler, great underground wrestler, great YouTube wrestler. It was really, I think, a message to everyone else who is in every community to watch out for Adam Anderson at the time.
I'm going to ask you one more question on that, but I want to say hello to somebody very quickly. That is, of course, the legendary Jack Delta, who like to say, "Much love, Chase. Can't watch the whole thing right now, but I will later." And obviously, Jack, we had said a few nice words about you. So obviously, I hope you're doing well out there. I hope you're recovering, and definitely, you always will get our love here on Sports Wired. And I definitely hope to speak with you whenever you're ready to. And definitely thank you for all you do out there in the ring. And obviously, big shout out to Jack Delta. But yeah, I was curious, and I ask questions to different guys when they have a match that's viewed that much. When you and Damian go back into the back, and maybe I don't know whatever you did after the match, if you did anything at all, I don't know. I don't. You can maybe plead the fifth on that if you want. But did you guys know after that match that you were going to have had that many people watch it? I mean, talk about that maybe.
So honestly, I when it comes to YouTube wrestling, it's a very hard algorithm to hit in YouTube itself. So it's very hit and miss. So I always had that feeling in the back, maybe that enough people would see it to my liking, like not in the sense of being selfish, but to a point where I feel contempt in a sense, because I think me and Damien had one of the best matches of that show, and I feel like everyone who wants to see what DBW was about, they should see that match. And I think whenever I did see we were climbing the thousands and thousands, where we were now today at 4,100 views, which is still crazy to me, I feel like I'm very accomplished. I think Damien would feel the same way too.
Yeah, because I know you have another match out there with 3,500 plus, and obviously that's one thing, but I mean that's obviously more views than the following itself
Hmm.
of DBW. So there's definitely people out there that watched that match and said, you know what, Chase Wakefield or Adam Anderson at the time, that's a guy that he's on the map, he's on the radar. And certainly it did put more eyeballs, had to have been in DBW, but I was kind of curious your perspective. But I have to ask you a couple of fun points related to DBW. So you were very clever in what you did to DVG in one of your more recent matches. Then there's a short out there on YouTube where you actually almost kicked somebody out of literally the building, locked him out. So I mean, I would not have thought of that as a wrestler in the ring. So I mean, maybe talk about those instances, which I think were kind of some of the more clever ones I've seen recently.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big things that I like to take pride in is really stepping outside the box or stepping outside the ring, I should say, when it comes to my wrestling matches. And they always say use every resource you have and able to be successful. And I was in the back, I was getting ready, I was lacing up my shoes, and I saw the door wide open. And I was like, huh, I wonder if this could be open from the outside. So I asked Matt Havoc, who is now Matt Moore,
Yep.
hey, can you test this out for me? I want to see if this works. And he obliged because I was obviously a great mentor for him. So I just locked him out. And I was like, "Can you get in?" He said, "No." And I said, "That's all I need to know." So I opened up the door again and I strategized how I was going to do it.
Well, you certainly did do that here. And I have to ask you about Thomas Taft. Obviously, Thomas Taft, who you have, I guess, been coming out to the ring with here over these past several DBW shows. And obviously, we spoke earlier about your contract running out. You're no longer going to be a part of DBW. So, what do you think the future will be for Thomas Taft? Obviously, he's been with you here over these past several shows. So, what do you think happens with him going forward?
Well, Tom, I do have some bad news for you. He's been calling me, messaging me nonstop. He thinks this is like some type of like bond that we have, but I I specifically told him as soon as I hired him that this is only a job for me to win the
Well,
Hub
you
State
did. What was
Championship.
it on DBW TV? It was basically referenced that you kind of basically bought him. So it didn't sound to me as if there was a true, I guess.
It's almost like my contract at DBW. I contracted
Ah,
him to do so much, and his contract ran out for me, and I don't need him anymore, really. And I don't think he really understands that I actually mean it by saying I don't need him. Like, but we will have to see what's going to happen because eventually I'm going to have to see him. I'm not ready for that, but Eventually, he's gonna come up to me at DBW's Double Cross.
All right,
Uh,
let me ask you something because obviously Double Cross hasn't come out yet. Your contract is running. I was thinking about this question. I have to ask it to you because you're a champion that no longer has a contract, and this is kind of like this is where wrestling gets weird. We saw this years ago with Medusa throwing out the then WWF Women's title in the trash. We all know the situation with Bret Hart at the time signing for WCW, but was still the WWF champion. Jeff Jarrett at one time was the Intercontinental Champion in WWF, and basically, depending on who you believe, had to be given a very, very lucrative buyout, basically, in order to show up and drop the title. So, let's say you retain this title at Double Cross, and you're the champion. Obviously, you're the Hub City champion now. So, what is the future of this DBW title? Do we go down the road of a Medusa, or like, what's the future?
I I know exactly what the future is gonna be. The future is gonna be I'm gonna replace the DBW in that with VTW, and it's gonna be a
Huh.
VTW championship.
I hadn't thought of that before. I had not thought of that before because I just would have thought, okay, well, you're defending another promotion's title, and basically that would be the end of it. We even had a show here on Friday with WC and IMF, and Soldier had talked about the fact that they were going to take Nicholas Crenson's title and just throw it out in the garbage. And CJ Black has a question here, and basically he wants to say you were invited to ROEW. He would love to stand across the ring from you and then immediately submit when given the option. So,
Yeah, I have been invited to ROEW. They are a bucket list federation for me. Ever since Jack Delta got into ROEW,
absolutely.
I've been kind of I've been kind of glued to them, and I think honestly they're the best upcoming federation right now for
So do
how
I.
new.
No, so do I. ROEW, I mean, the style of wrestling and the type of product that they put out there in terms of the editing, the wrestling, the flow of the storylines. That's really what got me into ROEW. This was maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. Don't quote me exactly, but ROEW TV really impresses me. There's a lot of originality, there's creativity to the product. And I think that's really why it's kind of one of the emerging companies. I mean, it's got a rare thing that it has a flow to it. I mean, so there's a really kind of like I say this all the time, it almost reminds me of like an old Mid-South AWA type of style back in the day where it just had that like sort of like how can I put it in music terms when I used to play the bass? Almost like the bass would sound warm. This kind of product that they put out there is very warm. It's a very inviting product on the eyes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one. It's I've been talking to some people down south about bringing some ROEW guys down. All they gotta do is show up, and I would love to ask CJ Black if he submits.
So that might be something that's on your bucket list then.
Yes, definitely. It is gonna happen for sure. I just don't know when.
So if there's a will, there's a way then pretty much.
Yes,
Well,
perfect.
I think a lot of people would like to see that, especially obviously with the likes of Jack Delta being there. Obviously, Soldier and Omen from the IMF have been there. Captain Law has been there. So definitely some of the more emerging and top talent have been there. You can follow ROEW on YouTube and Instagram at ROEW Backyard Wrestling. Their most recent show is up. It was a 6-man tag match. Definitely check it out. It's CJ Black, Omen, and Soldier against Captain Law, Jason Storm, who's their world champion, and Jacob Collins. It was a phenomenal match, and I think
Everyone did amazing, except for Captain Law. But everyone did phenomenal. I do gotta give credit to everyone in that match. Definitely one of the more polished backyard wrestling shows out there.
I couldn't agree with you more because I watch a lot of wrestling. I watch independent. I watch backyard, whatever you want to call it at this point. And some matches I watch, and look, I'm not a wrestler, but these guys and gals go out there in the ring and they should probably be in the cheap seats sitting somewhere. Maybe just go on and buy a t-shirt, support the wrestler that way. And, but what these guys do is out there is phenomenal. The abilities that they put out there and what they do in their work ethic and their desire and the creativity. I think the whole company and the product itself deserves a lot of praise here. So kind of in a way, piggybacking off that, you kind of answered one part to my question as we have a little bit more time with you left. What are your goals for 2023?
My goals for 2023 is to really expand myself in marketing. I will be going to a disclosed federation later in the year that has a lot of traction right now.
Okay.
A
Okay.
lot of traction. I can't wait to see what comes out on that. Other than that, prove to everyone in BTW that I deserve a shot at the top.
I'll come back to CJ in a second, but there was one part of what you just said, and I was curious because you've wrestled in a number of different states. And I was curious, is there a state that you haven't wrestled that you'd like to wrestle in?
Tennessee.
Okay, I'm gonna leave that there. I'm gonna leave that there. Okay, fair enough. CJ would like to say for shoots, being like VTW is what I'm striving for. As far as everyone looking trained and like they belong in the ring, that's the goal. You want to elaborate on that, maybe?
Yeah, you guys are getting pretty close, I will say. You guys got probably a few more steps to go, but you wrestling alone, you guys are just about there. You just keep going with what you're doing and really keep on marketing yourself and really like start looking at the editing process too. A lot of things that really make a show is the actual editing itself.
You know, it's fun. It's funny you said that. We're gonna have on Fletch, obviously, who's the man behind XCW Shelbyville here, and on Tuesday's show. And I probably am going to break the fourth wall in a second, but it's okay. I do it because obviously, I've spoken to the promoter, and he'll probably give me his blessing on this. The editing is maybe the most important aspect of a show. And I was speaking with Fletch, and I won't say who edits his shows out of respect to him, but he was telling me that they have up to 4 people edit their shows. Now, don't tell me how you do with DBW. Don't tell me how you do with VTW, but maybe talk about why it's important to have different people depending on your show for a number of reasons. Maybe edit your shows, because those are things that I wouldn't know.
Yeah, definitely. I think one big thing that causes there to be so many heads doing editing is the fact that not just spitballing ideas of one another, but if you have more eyes onto a unedited product, they can point out any flaws that you may have in your editing itself. Um, Plus, it makes the workload a lot more easier. It also gets things done faster. Um, there's tons of things that really help with having more people, but honestly, you can really get a great wrestling program with just one person.
What has DBW meant to you in your career?
They definitely got my start in wrestling in its like entirety. It went from trampoline wrestling to now. If I didn't do trampoline wrestling, I wouldn't be interested in doing homemade ring wrestling where we built our own ring. And if it wasn't for the homemade ring wrestling, I wouldn't have done it in an actual ring and where we're at now.
I'm sure people listening to this might appreciate this in some form. Let's say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right? The early stages of DBW. If you would have said that in 2023, Chase Wakefield would have wrestled in numerous states, would have been a pro wrestler, would have been in locker rooms with WWE talents, would have done all these different things, what would you have said to yourself?
Firstly, I probably would have not even believed you because some of the people I've met through my journey have been people I've looked up to as idols who really got me into backyard wrestling. People like Cage from KBW. He had been a big influence in me getting into backyard wrestling, and I got to meet him, let alone wrestle him in a Royal Rumble match. Uh, Also, uh, I think it would have been um, I would have looked at it as a possibility, but not a very high possibility because
So,
I'm always viewed as a small guy with high metabolism and stuff like that.
yeah,
And
it's funny. I was looking at you, and you are not short, but in terms of your frame, you're
lanky,
kind. Yeah, exactly. I think you and I are actually similar in that sense.
yeah.
I'm about 6 feet, but like I'm kind of lanky. I mean, I've always
Hmm.
been in good shape, but I've never been like muscular. But I've always exercised. I've always stayed in shape, but I would be considered like you, lanky. That's why when I was
Hmm.
watching you, I'm like, wow, we almost have like the same type of body built in that sense.
Yeah, and I think wrestling today really helps with the whole wrestling is for everyone, because back in the day you had all these
Oh, listen,
big guys like Hulk
if
Hogan.
you were less than 6'1" in the wrestling
No
business, they
chance.
didn't want anything to do with you. The whole game changed. Really, I would want to say Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart changed that in that sense, where they were like, I mean, Bret was big, but he wasn't like Hulk Hogan. He wasn't the Undertaker,
No.
Andre the Giant. But now it's a different world. I mean, MJF, who's obviously not too far from my neck of the woods, is the AEW World Champion, as an example. I mean, Seth Rollins is not super big. I mean, so now it's like it's a totally different environment, a different ballgame. So guys like you can be a world champion.
Exactly. And I still get it to this day in independence, because I have been with a lot like old head veterans. A lot of them still believe in that physique and that shape.
Attraction base sells tickets. I
Yeah.
get it. I get it.
So whenever they look at me, they're like, "What's this kid's gonna get squashed? Like, what are you doing?" But in January, I wrestled in a town called Chambersburg, PA, and I wrestled at the studio, and I wrestled this guy named Tremor. And Tremor's been wrestling for 25, 30 years now. He was in the same class as Mr. Judgment was back in the day.
Wow.
And having having wrestling him, he's like shorter than me, but he's like 350. He's a big dude. So
I'm
whenever
sure if he did a rolling senton, unlike yours, his would hurt a lot much more.
Oh, it would be, yeah. But like having all these big dudes first question me, but then whenever I get in the ring and prove that I can step up to them, it's really refreshing, and like it's an accomplishment in its own.
I was going to ask you before I get to one or two more questions with you. Again, we're here with Chase Wakefield, pro wrestling star. He's also the DBW Hub City champion. You can follow Chase on Instagram at @ChaseWakefield_PW. Also, please follow our friends at DBW at Dominating Breakout Wrestling on YouTube. Also, VTW Wrestling on YouTube as well. Both have well over 3,000 subscribers. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. I had to ask you about your entrance music because it was so unique, so interesting. So I have to ask, because sometimes I get a chance to do it, but I think I got enough time that I could get it in safely. So, I mean, talk about the entrance music and what was kind of the inspiration to that.
So I'm a big fan of really just the character itself. Like
Okay.
one person can do so many moves, but I won't remember them if they don't have a memorable character. But if someone does like two moves and like, but their character is like insanely good, I'll
Mhm.
remember them more. And I think one of the biggest factors of having a great character is your entrance music. It
Absolutely. I agree
it suits
1,000%
it
with that.
suits who you are as a person, as a character, and maybe how your work inside the ring is. So I really look at what a match entails, what the story is, and I go by my music on that term. So as for Ace Christian, I debuted a brand new song called "The Bitcoin Billionaire," and it's by an artist named Sellout, I believe,
Okay.
and it just fits the Bitcoin billionaire character
Yeah, it did
perfectly.
kind of have that like decadent, kind of like maybe just careless, kind of I'm in
Yeah,
my own abyss kind of moment, kind of mood.
exactly.
All right. Well, that kind of makes a lot of sense. I definitely get that Drake. I get that kind of Kanye West kind of vibe, a little bit. Lil Wayne. Also, I want to say a little Drake. Silverwolf says, "More power to you, bro." And D-Lock says that Ultimate Redemption entrance was fire.
Yes, I loved that entrance so much. I had the song "Runaway" by Kanye West as the theme, and I feel like just the song premise itself really suits how my journey was as a person leading up to that point, and I felt like it was the perfect time to do it against someone that I haven't wrestled in over half a decade.
Wow, what's that like then? Wrestling somebody that you have before, but not in over half a decade. It's got to be kind of unique and weird at the same time.
Yeah, with D'Lo, it was just seeing how much the person has evolved and then transpiring it into the ring
I
itself
mean, you spoke about
and
that in your
seeing
promo or your
yeah.
video toward him. That makes
But
sense.
yeah,
Okay.
it was perfect. I think that match was probably up there in my Mount Rushmore as favorite
Well,
matches.
that was going to be my next question, actually. That was going to be my next question. I've got a couple more here. But before I do that, I actually want to give a plug to a very good friend of mine who actually gave me this shirt in the UK. It is called the Kingdom of Wrestling. They are a family friendly professional wrestling company from Southport in the UK. You can follow them on the Kingdom _of_ wrestling. That is the Kingdom _of_ wrestling. They are also on Twitter as well at T_KOW. You can also find out more information on them at kingdomwrestling@gmail.com. That is kingdomowrestling@gmail.com. They have their next show coming up called The Royal Battle on August the 26th. It'll be at the Southport Market, so stay tuned for more details. Again, I want to thank them for giving us this shirt. I haven't got a chance to cut one of these in a while for them, so I had promised the person who shall name nameless that gave me this shirt, but please support our friends over again at the Kingdom of Wrestling, family-friendly professional wrestling from our very dear friends in Southport in the UK, the Kingdom _of_ wrestling. Kingdom O Wrestling at gmail.com for more information. T_KOW. Also here, Drake wants to thank everybody again here. So as I'm coming down to closing thoughts here, I have to ask you this question. I know you've had a lot of moments in your career, but is there one or two moments that stand out most in your career so far?
Ooh, that's a tough question here.
I told you I come prepared on Sportswire.
I think honestly, I think traveling to my first promotion that wasn't DBW was a very highlight of my career. It was a very small, not great company, called
Don't name
W.
them. Don't name them. Don't name them. Don't
The
even give them
the
attention.
the dysfunctional now. But whenever I came there, we DBW itself was probably 300 subs in. Like we were very new to the scene, and we were invited to these people. And whenever we got to the ring, if you call it a ring, it was I don't want to bash them, but it was very makeshift, but the bumps you took on that felt like absolute concrete.
Oh, oof.
And I remember someone was giving me an age Styles Clash, but you didn't tell me. So I
Oof.
was going for a back bump, but I landed straight on my neck.
Oh.
Yeah, it was not a great time, but it was my first time outside of DBW, which still makes it as a highlight for me.
Were you okay going back home though? Because that's serious. Yeah.
I was a little dazed, but I was good. No
Okay.
concussions, no injuries, no nothing.
All right. Well, that's an interesting one or two moments. I think DBW outside that's cool. I mean, any other moments stand out?
I think winning the world championship was the second one. Really showed that I actually belonged to be at the top of the spot, and really felt like a long waited accomplishment that was finally done.
That is actually, listen, they always say microphone issues. They always say that you remember the first. You remember your first
Mhm.
championship. So the fact that you won your first world title, I'm sure first of many world titles, you'll definitely remember that. So that is very, very important to know. And obviously, I have a feeling you're going to win many, many more titles ahead. And also, you're the first ever Hub City champion. So remember that was when you won that. That was cool too, being the first Hub City champion. You might be the only Hub City champion for all we know, because right now you're still the champion, and you've said that you're going to just rename the title. So you'll be the VTW Hub City champion at this.
Yeah, first ever DBW Hub State champion, last ever DBW Hub State champion.
That's a really interesting fact in the record books. I almost have to go out and find out if there's a first and a last. You'd actually be both. Usually, people like the first, like Pat Patterson's always known as the first ever Intercontinental champion. But you
Yep.
being the first ever Hub City champion and last Hub City champion, that's an interesting note here. But before I get to closing thoughts here, Champ, I want to ask you this. What do you want to say to anybody that has supported you on this journey? But also conversely, what do you want to say to anybody that is hearing you for the first time tonight that you like to tell them in order for them to come along with you on this journey that I think is going to lead you to bigger and better things?
Well, firstly, I want to thank everyone who has supported me throughout these like 8 years now that I've been doing it, and without you guys, I really probably wouldn't even be still doing it. Other than that, for the people that haven't seen me yet, and this is the first time they're hearing from me, I just want to say, catch me at BTW, catch me up at Redacted, and catch me up at ROEW, and I will hopefully change your mind and hopefully keep you as a fan of Double B Guaranteed.
Well, ROEW, that's a product that we watch on Sportswire regularly. So the fact that we get a chance to see you and somebody else that would like to say hello to you, you might have heard of them, name the Atomic Titan, says, "What's up, Chase?"
What's
And
up, Tone?
the Atomic has been here on Sportswire, and we're obviously big fans of the Atomic Titan and TBW. And you had mentioned Tennessee, so I won't say anything further on that. So I'm going to leave that there. But I know TBW has a show that was just released a little while ago, so you go to Tennessee Backyard Wrestling and watch the Intercontinental Title Tournament there. I will be watching that later on, and the Atomic Titan is always welcome on Sportswire. In fact, he always DMs me. He always says how I'm doing, how's everything going. So I always love the Atomic Titan. He's always one of my favorites. He just randomly says, "Hey, how's it going?" Which is always nice when somebody out there is like saying, "Hey, how you doing?" And also,
Yeah.
Brandon would like to say you seriously need to check out Chase's matches. If you guys haven't, you won't be disappointed. I can confirm that because I've seen a bunch of your matches. I feel like I was back in law class the last 2 days when I always kind of say this joke in law class. You had to like sit there and just crash everything. But the way I do it was like we watched like I must have been like 10 of your matches, but I watched them all kind of like not all in one shot, kind of like in a way I could digest it, which was pretty cool. And Atomic Titan would like to say thank you, Tom. And yes, I definitely Atomic Titan. Anytime you're welcome to Sportswire. I definitely want to bring you back on and definitely message me when I'm off the air. If anything I can do to help you, just let me know. And definitely want to get you back on. And also, one more thing I want to say about Brandon. Brandon's matches, I want people to see also because
Yes.
Brandon looks like another future world champion, just maybe a future DBW champion. And also follow him on YouTube as well, Crispy1000. He's got his vlog with his journey, shows in his life. So I like to make sure people support Brandon. And I'm very excited to speak with Brandon next Tuesday as well.
Yeah, Brandon, he is so underrated as a performer. He also has that vlog on his
Yep.
channel. You also have bits of me at
His
that
cat,
vlog as
I think,
well.
was trying to eat him. I think his poor,
Yeah,
I think his poor hands. I think
this
Brandon.
cat's
I'm
crazy.
surprised he still has a hand at this point.
This cat's crazy, man.
Yeah, that cat I think was going to eat his hand off. I mean, the poor Brandon there was like trying to grab his cat and play with his cat, and the cat was like, I don't think the cat wanted anything to do with it. But obviously, Brandon's an awesome guy. I'm looking forward to speaking with him next Tuesday, as well as a number of DBW and VTW talent in the future as well. But you have been a great guest. You have definitely lived up to the expectations and some. You've definitely proven why you're worth even more than I am, which is kind of hard for me to say at this point these days. So I'm going to give you a pass on that. You definitely earned it because you did the right things in Bitcoin, where I kind of should have did it 6 months earlier from the time I invested. But I am going to give you the floor now. I'm going to give you some closing thoughts. Anything else you want to plug, share, or say? It has been an absolute tremendous honor to have you on Sports by Radio. I certainly hope to have you on anytime you want. I turn it over to you. Anything else you want to plug, share, or say? The floor is yours.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me, Tom. It's been a great time. This almost 2 hours have gone up so fast, I will say.
That's what I try to do with people. I just let people talk. That's all I do. That's all I do.
Yeah. Well, I will say if you guys haven't checked out my Instagram, I do have all kinds of cool things. Like I've been Stunnered on Concert by Jaleel. I've been
850,000 followers there. So you mean you have to talk about that in the closing thoughts? I kind of was saving that for the end. So, I mean,
perfect
how did
timing.
that all come about?
Yeah, so I've been into Jaleel's music for a long time. He's been into he got famous off of TikTok with a song
Okay.
called Dive In. And he's this big muscular guy
I
that does
saw that.
rap.
I saw his Instagram. Like, yeah, he's definitely big.
He has the most angelic voice for a man of that size. And I've seen him the show that I was at was my third time seeing him. I've seen him in Philadelphia all 3 times. So this time I had a VIP meet and greet with Jaleel. And I came up to Jaleel. I was nervous as all heck. I was nervous. And I was like, Jaleel, I'm a professional wrestler. I do this for a living, well, as a hobby, and here's some of my stuff. And I always had a dream that you would stunner me on stage because you have a song called Stone Cold, and it's about him stuttering and stuff like that. And he showed it. He checked out my stuff. He followed me on Instagram, and he's like, all right, let me go ask my manager to see if we can do it because of venue restrictions, stuff like that. Um, so the show goes on. It was a phenomenal show. Everyone did amazing. You had guys like another artist named Sid Shine, another artist named Wi-Fi God, a bunch of underground people performing for everyone. And I stage dived off of Sid Shine's thing. That
Oh
was a
wow.
crazy story. But then when Jaleel came out, he did his performance. He was halfway through, and in my head, I was like, man, is this not going to happen? So I positioned myself to the side of the stage to where he could see me better, just in case he didn't see me. And once he was done with the song, he was walking around like a robot, and he saw me and he pointed at me and said, "You." And I was like, "Well, I guess it's time." So I jumped the barricade. I got on stage, and he asked, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Double B Guaranteed, Chase Wakefield." And then he whispered to me, "Do you still want to do the stunner?" I was like, "Yes, just duck my clothesline." And then I was talking for a little bit, and my head was like, how am I going to get Jaleel mad at me? Like, he's one of the most positive rappers that I know. How is he going to get mad at me? So I'm going to go for a clothesline. So I went for the clothesline. He caught it. And he's like, you are not going to clothesline Jaleel like that. I said, yes, I am. And he put down the mic, and then the video started where I went for the other clothesline. He ducked, gave me a stunner, and then continued with his performance.
Wow. I mean, that had to do a lot for your career. I mean, a guy with almost 1 million followers on Instagram, TikTok, it's just as big, if not bigger. I mean, that's like, bucket list moment there. I mean, that's one you're
Oh
gonna
yeah,
have in the resume for the rest of your life. I mean, that's pretty cool.
yeah, and it's insane because now that I go back to Philadelphia, people will probably know who I am from
I
getting
would
beat up
think
by
they would
Jaleel.
after that. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Jaleel. I mean, listen, I'm gonna have to mention one of my friends, which is a guy, a producer. His name's Dennis Root Saunders, and his girlfriend, I'm gonna date him. He's gonna get mad at me for this, but his girlfriend was actually a dancer for MC Hammer. So I have to
Oh
mention
wow.
Jaleel. Yeah, he's from Pennsylvania, Dennis Saunders. So the next time I see Dennis, because Dennis is a limo driver in my neighborhood, I usually see him about every week. I'm gonna mention Jaleel next time. So I'm going to make sure that I
Oh
mention
yeah.
your name and Jaleel because Dennis is a big time promoter. He probably knows Jaleel, so
Hell yeah.
I'm going to have to mention that here. And my guest tomorrow night says, "Hello, Mr. Jason Storm. You mentioned ROEW. That's a place you might want to go to. You might be seeing it." And he says, "Hello, Mr. Chase. Anything you want to say to the wild card? He's going to be on here tomorrow night. Anything you want to say to him?"
The wild card himself, Jason Storm.
Yes.
I love his work. He's done so much good in ROEW.
Yes.
Him, CJ Black. Like I said before, everyone there has done amazingly, and Jason Storm definitely is one of those champions that you need to see on YouTube.
He's definitely impressed me. I see him in Captain Law's company. I've seen him in a number of different places, and he's definitely a rising star. And he was also at SummerSlam out there, so I definitely want to give a big shout out to Jason. So, anything else you want to plug? Any social medias out there? One more time. Anything else
Yeah,
before we
sure.
sign up tonight?
My Instagram, Chase Wakefield _ PW. Shoot me a DM. I'm always on. I'm always available. So if you want to talk about anything, feel free to hit me up with any dates, with any shows. I'm free for basically the rest of the year. I have 1 or 2 more shows, and that's about it.
All right. Well, definitely make sure you follow him, Chase Wakefield _ PW. He's also got a YouTube page. He's also got a Twitter. Make sure you check him there. And future second-time world champion Chase Wakefield and future one-time world champion coming up, Brandon Castellati. So I'm really excited for Brandon. Also, Jason will be with us for a whole number of things here. But I'm really looking forward to watching eventually whenever it comes out DBW. I'm looking forward to more VTW shows in the future. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. As I stated a few minutes ago, anytime you want to come on, floor is definitely yours. And I'm looking forward to the future. And congratulations. And there's an old adage, a rising tide lifts all boats. And you will definitely be a rising tide in an industry that can certainly need its boats being lifted. My friend, thank you for the opportunity. Keep up the great work. I look forward to watching you for many, many more years ahead in the different companies, wherever you grace. I hope to see you in a ring one day here in the Big Apple. And thank you for your time. Congratulations, champ. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you very soon.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the reigning, defending DBW Hub City champion, Chase Wakefield, the Double B, the Bitcoin billionaire, the land of the NFTs where he is from and the metaverse. He'll be in the ring coming up here for DBW's Double Cross. We'll also see him coming up here in VTW TV, redemption shows, and obviously their big show later this year. So definitely please make sure you follow Chase Wakefield one more time, Chase Wakefield _PW on Instagram, also YouTube, Twitter as well. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. If you're on sportnarium.com/player, you go back to your regularly scheduled program, and I'll be back here tomorrow night, right after Monday Night Raw, with the REW World Champion, the wild card Jason Storm, who Chase Wakefield might very well see in the ring. But for more DBW coverage, next Tuesday, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, Brandon Castellati, and also coming up here this coming Thursday, Mr. Judgment himself. Who knows what the judgment is going to be? I keep thinking about that Van Halen song, Judgment Day, where it's my life. Get off my butt. Get out of my way, because I might want to get out of my way when Mr. Judgment comes on, because he is going to probably be in a mood that is going to be like no other. But until then, thank you, everybody, here for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, on the number one global radio station that is Sports Wire Radio.